Balmoral looks like a fairy tale carved in granite, an alpine refuge where mist clings to the pines and power retreats behind thick stone walls. But this castle isn't a museum of the state, it's the monarch's private stronghold, a working estate sprawling over 50,000 plus acres, grouse moors, forests, deer herds, kept far from the crown estate's ledgers and close to the family's inner life. Every morning, a lone piper stands beneath the royal window and lets the first notes cut through the cold. 9 a.m., 15 minutes, the ritual that woke a queen and now wakes a king. That sound announces order. The day has begun. Traditions are intact, and Balmoral still answers to no clock but its own. When autumn comes, the staff and local community gather for the Gillies Ball, a century-old dance where upstairs and downstairs share the same floor, briefly, before ranks settle back into their familiar places. Yet the story that glitters from postcards rarely matches the one whispered down narrow corridors. Former staff accounts speak of grueling shifts and silence as policy, of cleaning rules so strict that even a mundane tool could be judged too disruptive. Reports and documentaries have long claimed that vacuum cleaners were discouraged around the monarch. Noise offends, tradition prevails, and that the best servant is neither seen nor heard. Whether custom or command, it tells you everything about who gets to make a sound in this house and who doesn't. Tonight, we step past the tourist paths and into the service stairs to trace how a Highland idyll became a pressure cooker. What's myth, what's documented, and what still hides in the fog of royal secrecy. This is Balmoral, the elegance, the power, and the people who kept the fires burning, often without a word.
The story of Balmoral begins not with a queen, but with a prince obsessed with escape. In the damp summer of 1852, Prince Albert came across an advertisement for a Scottish estate battered by rain. Without telling Queen Victoria, he sent £32,000, a staggering sum then, equivalent to millions today, to secure it. Only afterward did he reveal the surprise. To Albert, this wasn't a mere retreat. It was the promise of freedom, pine-scented air, and a landscape untouched by the court's suffocating rituals. The old house standing on the land proved inadequate. Within 4 years, Albert ordered it torn down and replaced with a new granite castle, completed in 1856, its pale stones sparkling against the Highland hills. He personally sketched the clock tower, ensuring even its chimes rang in E-flat, so gentle they would not frighten the ponies grazing below. Balmoral was not just a residence, it was Albert's vision of a royal sanctuary, designed in almost obsessive detail. He carved intimacy into its structure, narrow corridors to force family members to meet, carvings of their 9 children at the entrance, and windows that opened to the Highland winds. Over the decades, Balmoral grew into an empire within an empire. 53,000 acres, 150 separate buildings, its own power supply, and even a secret 3-mile railway to discreetly deliver royal luggage. Unlike Buckingham Palace, Balmoral did not belong to the state. It was, and remains, private property of the royal family. Every deer sold, every cottage rented, every timber log felled flowed back into their personal fortune. Critics in Parliament called it excessive. King Edward VII dismissed them, describing Balmoral as the family's inescapable refuge. To the outside world, the castle embodied Scottish romance, a fairy tale fortress where the monarch walked among heather and hunted stags. But from the start, Balmoral's beauty was built on labor. Behind its picturesque walls, workers lived in attic rooms that froze in winter. Their loyalty was secured by contracts of silence. While the granite walls promised sanctuary to the royals, they also trapped generations of servants in lives that were anything but free. The first servants who entered Balmoral after its completion in 1856 walked into a world unlike any other in Britain. For them, the castle was not a fairy tale home. It was a workplace governed by traditions older than themselves. They rose before dawn, stoked fires in more than 50 hearths, and polished silver until their fingers ached. For many, it was their first and only job, a life sentence written in silence and soot. In the 19th century, employment at Balmoral carried a peculiar weight. Staff were expected to disappear into the background, neither seen nor heard, as one steward allegedly told new hires. Unlike city servants in London, Highland workers endured isolation. The castle sat far from villages, reachable only by a long, single road. Once a maid stepped inside its walls, she belonged to Balmoral more than to her own family. Contracts bound them to secrecy, and breaking that vow meant immediate dismissal. But there were rituals designed to remind them of their place. One rule demanded that servants curtsy to any room a royal had just left, even if it was empty. What seemed a quaint tradition quickly became a daily torment. Some maids described curtsying dozens of times in a single evening, their knees bruised and bandaged beneath crisp uniforms. Respect was not optional, it was compulsory, repeated until the gesture lost all dignity. Still, Balmoral had its moments of surreal spectacle. Each September, servants were invited to the Gillies Ball, a tradition dating back to 1858, where kitchen hands and footmen could dance with princes and princesses. For one night, hierarchy seemed to dissolve beneath chandeliers and bagpipes. Yet even here, rank determined privilege. Invitations edged in gold for the favored staff, plain paper for the rest. At midnight, as royals slipped away, silence reclaimed the hall, reminding everyone of their true stations. These early years forged the culture that endured for generations, the double life of Balmoral. By day, servants were silent ghosts, polishing, cooking, and carrying chamber pots through narrow stone passages. At night, they were reminded of their distance from power, even as they danced inches away from it. To the public, Balmoral was a retreat of freedom. For those who worked there, it was a gilded cage, one whose keys remained firmly in royal hands.
By the late 19th century, Balmoral had transcended its origins as a Highland retreat. It was no longer just a granite castle tucked into the Scottish hills. It was the beating heart of the royal family's mythology. Queen Victoria, in particular, transformed Balmoral into a national symbol. She called it the place where she smelled pine and freedom, an almost spiritual refuge that healed her after Albert's death. Pain and memory mingled within its walls, yet to the outside world, Balmoral radiated romance. Postcards depicted the castle bathed in sunlight, with the Queen wandering through heather, hand in hand with her children. It was marketed not as a private estate, but as the very embodiment of Britain's royal identity. The architecture itself became iconic. Prince Albert's design choices, once ridiculed as barn-like, soon influenced an entire generation of country homes. Within 2 decades, 80% of new Scottish estates echoed Balmoral's silhouette. Steep gables, turrets, granite facades sparkling against stormy skies. What began as Albert's personal dream had reshaped the nation's landscape. But Balmoral was more than stone and mortar. It was theater.
Every royal arrival was carefully choreographed. Trains carried luggage in secret along the private railway, while servants staged picnics beside rivers where the queen herself washed dishes. The image was of simplicity. Royals living close to the land, sharing fireside meals, embodying the spirit of Scotland. Newspapers devoured these details, spreading the myth of a family both powerful and humble. Inside, however, the castle served a different purpose. It became a sanctuary where the family could guard its deepest secrets. Victoria's controversial closeness with her servant John Brown blossomed here, beyond London's judgmental eyes. Decades later, Edward VIII practiced his abdication speech within these same halls, pacing rooms that had witnessed grief, romance, and betrayal. Balmoral's insulation was its greatest shield. What happened in these narrow corridors rarely reached the outside world, unless a servant dared to speak. The rituals of power also grew during this golden period. The annual Gillies Ball, begun in the 1850s, became legend. An evening when cooks and stable boys might dance with dukes, and even a dishwasher could twirl across the floor with a prince. Stories of Prince Philip spiking the punch, or Princess Diana comparing the event to a prom mixed with Downton Abbey, only heightened its mystique. Yet beneath the laughter, hierarchy remained absolute. The edge of your invitation revealed your rank. When the clock struck midnight, the illusion dissolved, and staff returned to silence. Balmoral's glory years also coincided with the expansion of its estate. By the early 20th century, it sprawled across 53,000 acres, dwarfing major European capitals. Mountains, forests, moors, all stitched into one private kingdom. Unlike Buckingham Palace, Balmoral belonged to the Windsors themselves, not the state. Every rented cottage, every felled tree, every deer sold lined their personal accounts. In Parliament, critics raised questions, but King Edward VII silenced them with a single phrase: Balmoral was the family's inescapable refuge. It was a refuge, yes, but one sustained by invisible hands. By the height of Balmoral's fame, nearly 150 staff kept the estate alive each season. Gillies managed hunting grounds, horsemen prepared royal rides, cleaners brushed carpets for hours without complaint. A lone piper played every morning at 7, his notes drifting through the mist to wake a monarch. Each task, no matter how menial, became part of the performance. The public saw only the sparkle. The reality, the exhaustion, the bruised knees, and the whispered warnings remained hidden behind locked gates. In these years, Balmoral shone brightest. To the world, it was the royal family's fairy tale fortress, proof that monarchy could blend grandeur with rustic charm. But like every fairy tale, its brilliance masked a darker truth. The higher Balmoral rose in myth, the deeper its shadows grew. Shadows that would eventually consume those who served within.
For every glittering image of Balmoral in the press, there was a servant bent double in silence, polishing what would never be theirs. The castle's beauty was sustained by rules so rigid they bordered on cruelty. To outsiders, the granite walls sparkled against the Highland mist. To those inside, they pressed down like stone shackles. The rules were as bizarre as they were unforgiving. One demanded that maids curtsy to empty rooms if a royal had just left. It was less a gesture of respect than a ritual of submission. In one season alone, staff recorded more than 60 curtsies in a single evening. Knees swelled, bandages wrapped under skirts, but still the curtsying continued. Tradition mattered more than dignity. Speech was dangerous. Servants were instructed to act deaf when royals spoke in passing. To register what was said, even by accident, risked dismissal and the loss of a year's bonus. One maid recounted overhearing Prince Charles whisper to Diana in the mid-1980s. The next morning,
She was written up, warned never to hear again. Silence wasn't just encouraged, it was survival. The work itself bordered on brutal. Vacuum cleaners were banned. The noise displeased Queen Elizabeth, so maids scrubbed carpets on their knees with horsehair brushes. A single hallway could take 45 minutes. Dust clung so thickly to their aprons, they washed them twice a day. Wrists throbbed until holding a fork at dinner became impossible. Yet no complaints were permitted. The manual stated bluntly, "Loyalty is its own reward." Even the comforts of rest were illusions. Staff quarters in the attics plunged to near freezing in winter. Blankets were thin. Hot water ran for only half an hour, and chamber pots replaced proper toilets. Many contracted chilblains, some pneumonia. A few were dismissed for missing shifts while ill. While the royals enjoyed roaring fires, servants shivered in damp sheets. Pay offered little relief. In the 1980s, a housemaid earned around $18,000 a year, scarcely above the national average, despite 60-hour weeks and year-round residence. Male gamekeepers, by contrast, earned several thousand more. Advancement was slow, raises meager. Many maids left after a single year, calling it a life given to a shadow. But shadows cannot hold secrets forever. In 1988, one young maid sold her story to the French press. She revealed everything from royal dinner rituals to which dogs slept outside Princess Anne's door. The revelation sparked scandal across Europe and fury inside Balmoral. Within hours, the palace branded it a gross breach of trust and tightened secrecy rules. Staff were bound to the Official Secrets Act, their silence now a matter of law. Still, fragments of humanity broke through the cracks. That same maid recounted a dinner where a guest mistakenly drank from a finger bowl, mistaking rosewater for soup. Instead of mocking him, the Queen and her family quietly copied the mistake, sipping perfumed water so the man would not feel ashamed. 17 bowls sat empty by the meal's end. It was a rare moment of kindness in a house ruled by protocol. But kindness could not erase fear. Staff described the hallways of Balmoral as quieter than any library, not from reverence but from terror. Every silence was a defense, every curtsy a shield, every brushed carpet a small surrender. The glamour of Balmoral's glory years rested on this invisible labor, on the bent backs, the bruised knees, and the unheard voices of those who served. This was the paradox of Balmoral. The more it shone as a royal idol in the public eye, the more suffocating its reality became for those who kept it alive. Glory demanded sacrifice, and the sacrifice was silence. But silence, like stone, eventually cracks, and when it did, the myths of Balmoral would crumble, revealing the human cost hidden beneath every polished silver spoon.
By the end of the 20th century, the myth of Balmoral began to crack. The granite walls that had once shielded secrets could no longer contain the rising tide of discontent. Whispered complaints turned into leaks, and leaks became headlines. The 1988 maid's confession was only the beginning. In the decades that followed, more and more staff walked away, leaving behind stories of grueling shifts, humiliating rules, and poverty wages. Their departures stripped away the fairy tale veneer, exposing Balmoral as a place where loyalty was demanded but rarely rewarded. The collapse became undeniable in the 1980s and 1990s, when long-serving maids abandoned their posts after bitter winters in unheated rooms and endless 12-hour days. Interviews revealed that rain leaked through the slate roofs, uniforms froze stiff overnight, and illness meant not sympathy, but dismissal. For every glamorous photograph of royals in tartan, there were workers trudging through damp corridors carrying chamber pots as if the 19th century had never ended. The 21st century brought no relief. In 2019, a cleaner leaked photos of the Royal Children's Treehouse, prompting a palace-wide ban on cameras.
The overreaction signaled just how fragile the family's control had become. By 2024, the illusion fully fractured. An anonymous housekeeper posted a blistering review online, calling Balmoral's management toxic. She described bosses yelling at staff in front of guests, docking break times as punishment, and paying less than the national living wage. Within a week, 5 maids quit together. Bedrooms sat uncleaned until late at night, while supervisors locked themselves in offices to avoid confrontation. Worse still, the rot spread beyond Balmoral. At King Charles's Highgrove estate, nearly the entire gardening staff resigned in 2025. They spoke of impossible demands, replanting hundreds of flowers overnight, hauling 180 kilos of compost alone, working 60-hour weeks for little more than minimum wage. One gardener tore his shoulder and received no proper sick pay. Within 9 days, all but one had walked out. By August 2025, Balmoral itself faced crisis. Room attendants staged a mass walkout, refusing to sleep on cold floors or meet impossible cleaning deadlines. At dawn, the castle gates were locked, officially due to storm winds, but the truth was far darker. The household was collapsing from within. What had once been the royal family's inescapable refuge now became a symbol of inescapable decline. The same granite walls that promised stability revealed themselves as brittle under pressure. Balmoral's tragedy was not a sudden fall, but a slow erosion. A century of silence finally breaking, one voice, one walkout, one scandal at a time.
Balmoral Castle still stands, its granite walls gleaming pale against the Highland mist, its turrets reaching skyward like the spires of a fairy tale. For tourists, for photographers, for those who believe in monarchy's mystique, it remains a place of wonder, an eternal postcard. But for those who labored within, Balmoral is remembered less as a sanctuary than as a shadow, a fortress of rules, silence, and sacrifice. Its legacy is a paradox. On one hand, Balmoral symbolizes continuity, the crown's ability to root itself in the land, to project stability in an uncertain world. On the other, it embodies the costs of that illusion, the bent backs of servants, the whispers silenced by contracts, the generations who gave their youth for little more than bruised knees and empty thanks. The scandals of recent years, the walkouts, the leaked stories, the viral posts of maids denied leave, did more than expose poor management. They stripped away the myth of Balmoral as an unchanging refuge, revealing it instead as a pressure cooker of inequality. The castle's fairy tale image will endure, legends always do, but for the public, and perhaps even for the royal family, the shadow of those who left will always linger, a silent reminder that beneath the grandeur lies a debt never repaid. In the end, Balmoral is both dream and prison, legend and labor camp. Its walls preserve a dynasty, yes, but they also echo with the quiet footsteps of those who walked away, leaving behind not just a job, but a truth the monarchy could never fully contain. Behind every polished silver tray and every carefully staged royal picnic lies a truth most will never see. Balmoral Castle, the fairy tale fortress of kings and queens, is also a house of silence, its beauty built on the backs of those whose voices were never meant to be heard. If this story has pulled back the curtain for you, know that there are countless more waiting in the shadows. Tales of Hollywood legends, royal scandals, and untold tragedies that shaped the stars we thought we knew. Subscribe to Beyond the Red Carpet for more hidden histories, forgotten whispers, and the secrets that lie just beyond the spotlight. Because the truth is never where the cameras are. It's where the silence begins.